What if I told you the Goo Goo Dolls' biggest hit almost never existed? Iris wasn't born from success. It came out of desperation when Johnny Rzeznik was ready to walk away from music forever. Yet, in that darkest moment, he wrote a song that would change everything. The Edge Before the Miracle. By the late 1990s, the Goo Goo Dolls weren't strangers to success. Their song name had already given them a taste of mainstream recognition. But instead of riding the momentum, frontman Johnny Rzeznik found himself crumbling under the pressure. Success can be the loudest silence. After the applause fades, the question lingers. What if that was it? What if I'll never write something that good again? For Rzeznik, that question became unbearable. Every time he picked up his guitar, nothing came out. Days turned into weeks of blank pages and half-finished ideas. He admitted later that he was ready to give up on songwriting altogether. Imagine the weight of that moment, a musician at the edge of his career, convinced he had already peaked, haunted by the fear that his best work was behind him. But rock history has a way of turning desperation into brilliance. One night, sitting alone with his guitar, Rzeznik stumbled into a melody that refused to let go. It wasn't forced, it wasn't crafted, it just appeared. The chords carried a kind of aching beauty, a sound that felt both fragile and eternal. Almost instinctively, words began to follow. And I'd give up forever to touch you. Those weren't just lyrics, they were a confession, a raw outpouring from someone who felt invisible, someone who was terrified of being misunderstood, but still craved connection. It was as if all of the frustration, self-doubt, and loneliness that had paralyzed him finally broke open in a single moment of clarity. That night, everything changed. Rzeznik had gone from staring at the possibility of silence to birthing the song that would define his career. And he knew it was different. He later described the writing of Iris as almost supernatural, like the song had written him. It wasn't just another track, it was survival, the very thing that pulled him back from the edge. Think about that for a second. One of the most enduring love songs of the 90s, a ballad that millions would one day use to express their deepest feelings, was born in a moment when its writer was about to quit forever. That's the paradox of Iris. It came from the darkest corner of doubt, yet it became a beacon of light, not just for the Goo Goo Dolls, but for everyone who would hear it. And the mystery only deepens when you realize the name Iris never even appears in the song at all. A name that doesn't belong. When you first listen to Iris, something strange stands out. The word Iris never once appears in the lyrics. There's no mention of the name, no hidden reference, not even a passing hint. And yet, this nameless word became the title of one of the most powerful love songs of all time. So, why did Johnny Rzeznik choose it? The story is almost accidental. In the middle of his creative storm, while struggling to finish the song, Rzeznik flipped through a copy of LA Weekly. Somewhere between the pages of local events and listings, he spotted the name of a folk singer, Iris Dement. There was no deep connection, no hidden tribute, just a single word that jumped off the page and stuck in his head. He later admitted he thought it was beautiful, mysterious, and haunting. It carried a weight that matched the intensity of the song. Without overthinking it, he made the decision. This song will be called Iris. On the surface, it sounds almost careless, naming your greatest work after a word that had nothing to do with it. But maybe that's part of the magic. The lyrics themselves are about being misunderstood, about hiding your truest feelings because you fear the world won't accept them. By giving the song a title that doesn't tie directly to the words, Rzeznik created another layer of mystery. The name becomes a mask, a shield, leaving the listener to wonder who or what is Iris. Some fans have spent years speculating. Was Iris a secret muse, a lover hidden in the shadows, a metaphor for sight, for the eye, for finally being seen? The truth is simpler than the theories, but the beauty of music is that interpretation belongs to the listener. Every time someone hears Iris, they can project their own meaning onto it. For some, Iris is the name of the person they love. For others, it's the part of themselves they're too scared to reveal. And maybe that's why the title works so well. It doesn't lock the song into one narrative. It leaves space for everyone who hears it to claim a piece of it for themselves. In the end, the mystery of the name only deepens the intimacy of the song. It's as if Rzeznik gave the world a blank canvas and said, "This is yours now. Fill in the name, fill in the story. But while the name added mystery, the lyrics themselves carried something far heavier, an aching reflection on love, sacrifice, and the desire to be truly seen, choosing love over forever. Iris wasn't written in a vacuum. It was born out of Hollywood, tied directly to the 1998 film City of Angels. The movie tells the story of an angel, played by Nicolas Cage, who falls in love with a human woman. To be with her, he has to make the ultimate choice: give up immortality for the fleeting, fragile experience of human love. It's a theme of sacrifice, vulnerability, and the raw ache of connection. Exactly the emotional territory that Johnny Rzeznik was living in when he picked up his guitar. That's where the opening line came from, "And I'd give up forever to touch you." It wasn't just poetic, it was the heart of the movie's story. But it was also Rzeznik's own confession. He later said the lyrics spilled out of him, like he was writing a letter he'd never dare to send. Lines like, "I don't want the world to see me, 'cause I don't think that they'd understand," weren't about fantasy. They were about his very real fear of vulnerability. What makes Iris so powerful is that it blurs the line between fiction and truth. On one hand, it's the anthem of a film about an angel choosing love. On the other, it's the sound of a songwriter who felt invisible, pouring every ounce of his longing and insecurity into the chords. That duality is what gives the song its bite. When you hear it, you're not just hearing a soundtrack, you're hearing a man at his breaking point, speaking the words he couldn't say out loud. And the vulnerability doesn't stop with the lyrics. The entire structure of the song mirrors its theme. It starts quietly, almost hesitantly, as if it's afraid to reveal too much. Then, with each verse and chorus, it swells, growing louder, fuller, more desperate, like a confession spilling out faster than it can be contained. By the time Rzeznik's voice hits its peak, it feels less like a performance and more like a cry. That's why the song resonated so deeply. Listeners didn't just hear a love story, they felt their own longing reflected back at them. Iris became more than a soundtrack to a movie. It became the soundtrack to breakups, first loves, and the secret emotions people rarely say aloud. And when it finally reached the airwaves, it didn't just resonate, it took over. Because what came next wasn't just success, it was a record-breaking history. Breaking records, touching souls. When Iris finally hit the airwaves in 1998, it wasn't just another song on the radio, it was an unstoppable force. Within weeks of its release, it climbed the charts and refused to let go. On Billboard's Hot 100 Airplay chart, it reigned at #1 for an astonishing 18 consecutive weeks. Think about that. For over 4 months, no other song could dethrone it. At the time, it was the longest-running #1 hit in the history of that chart. And it wasn't just the United States. Across the globe, Iris was dominating. In the UK, it became a top 10 hit. In Australia and Canada, it found a permanent place on playlists. By the end of the year, it wasn't only the Goo Goo Dolls' signature song, it had become one of the defining ballads of the late 90s. For a band that had nearly lost faith in their future, it was redemption on the grandest scale. But here's the remarkable part. The song didn't just live in the charts, it lived in people's lives. Couples used it as their wedding song. Teenagers clung to it during their first heartbreaks. Soldiers wrote home about it. For millions, Iris wasn't background music. It was a piece of their story. That's why, even as the years passed, it never disappeared. Decades later, it's still finding new life. In 2020, during the height of global uncertainty, the Goo Goo Dolls' acoustic renditions of Iris went viral on social media, reminding listeners of its timeless comfort. In 2024, it was featured prominently in Deadpool and Wolverine, exposing an entirely new audience to its haunting chords. And in 2025, it returned again through the sci-fi thriller Companion. Each reappearance breathes new energy into the song, proving that even after 25 years, its emotional power hasn't dimmed. What's even more impressive is how it resonates with generations who weren't even alive when it was first released. At Goo Goo Dolls concerts today, you'll see teens and 20-somethings screaming every word alongside fans who first fell in love with it in the 90s. Few songs achieve that kind of cross-generational magic. It's a rare feat. A track that once ruled radio still rules hearts decades later. And yet, while the world was embracing it as an anthem of love and longing, some fans started hearing something else entirely, an interpretation that was darker, more controversial, and impossible to ignore. And that's where the story takes a surprising turn. Wild theories from the shadows. For most people, Iris is a love song, aching, tender, and universal. But over the years, some listeners began to hear something else hidden within the lyrics. The song's openness, its refusal to explain itself directly, invited speculation. And in the corners of fan forums and online debates, alternative interpretations began to surface, some heartfelt, others unsettling. One of the most discussed theories suggests that Iris isn't about romantic love at all, but about unrequited love of a different kind. Some fans speculated that the lyrics might represent longing for someone who could never return those feelings, like a child or someone completely out of reach. The idea is controversial, and there's no evidence to support it. Rzeznik himself never hinted at such a meaning. But the very fact that people could read that much depth into the song shows just how ambiguous and emotionally charged it is. Others have argued that Iris is less about love and more about isolation. To them, the line, "I don't want the world to see me because I don't think that they'd understand," doesn't sound like a declaration of romance. It sounds like a cry for help, the words of someone hiding behind a mask, terrified of exposure. For listeners who have battled loneliness, depression, or feeling invisible, those lyrics aren't about a lover at all. They're about themselves. That's the strange beauty of Iris. It functions almost like a mirror. Rzeznik may have written it for a movie about an angel, but listeners project their own lives into it. To a newlywed couple, it's a wedding vow. To a heartbroken teenager, it's a soundtrack to sleepless nights. To someone struggling in silence, it's a confession they could never put into words. Each person takes the song and bends it into their own truth. And that's why the theories keep multiplying. They aren't really about uncovering the real meaning. They're about explaining why the song feels so personal, the mystery of the title, the vulnerability of the lyrics, the soaring chorus that feels like both hope and despair. It all combines to create a canvas where everyone sees their own reflection. In the end, whether you believe Iris is about love, loss, invisibility, or something else entirely, the fact remains. It still sparks conversation more than 2 decades later. Very few songs achieve that kind of timeless ambiguity. And for the Goo Goo Dolls, it wasn't just a song, it was salvation. But the question remains, how did a track that nearly wasn't written become the anthem of a generation? The answer lies in what Iris ultimately represents, a song born out of pain, transformed into timeless beauty. Iris wasn't just another hit song, it was the turning point for a band on the edge of collapse. It was a lifeline for its writer, and later, an anthem for millions who felt invisible. Born from coincidence, baptized in heartbreak, and carried by raw honesty, it became timeless. So the next time you hear Iris, ask yourself, what would you give up forever just to feel one moment of being truly seen? If this story about Iris moved you, imagine the stories hidden behind other timeless hits. Don't let this be the last song you uncover. Hit subscribe and join us here at Backstage Melody, where every track has a secret waiting to be told.